Hiya! Welcome to this, my 27th installment of Video Fuzzy titled Digging Dirt. I'm your host Terry J. Amon, and in this installment I franken-disc an outrageous episode of Courtney Cox's Dirt on FX. I run into some cool episodes of Psych and the 4400, and in what I've been watching, I burn through the rest of Supernatural in Season 12, pull some thoughts together on Michael Bay's The Island, and oh wow, Deadpool 2, am I right? Welcome to the show.
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.
Just a side note to begin, I'm still working on my anniversary special, and anyone wanting to be part of that can contact me through Messenger at my Video Fuzzy Facebook page, or send email to tjaman1970@yahoo.com. Audio or video files are welcome, and I can work with just about anything, and in the words of an old Burleson James ad for wine coolers, thank you for your support.
Friday Night Feature.
An aspiring hardball senatorial candidate, her vindictive teenage son, and the paparazzo chained up in her sex dungeon. This is the episode I've been looking forward to chatting about for weeks now, after plans for last time's Friday Night Feature fell through and the episode turned up split across two discs in my classic collection, discs 479 and 488. In the second season of Dirt on FX, Courtney Cox as Lucy Spiller, editor of the splashy tabloid Dirt Now, is recovering from a knife wound at the hands of a first-season story arc romantic rival. As of this episode, Season 2, Episode 3, God Bless the Child, Lucy is raising money for the hospital that stitched her back together and encounters Sharon Lawrence as somewhat embattled senatorial prospect Cassie Hope, who was on the tabloid's radar for inappropriate sexual contact with her campaign manager. She wants a fresh start and invites Lucy's reporters to her home for a rah-rah family, house and homemaker, God and country profile. But that's not really what Dirt Now is about. Dirt Now is about what they find when they're not invited. Lucy's not interested in the puff piece, but she thinks there's something off about Cassie's out-of-control sex drive, her uptight husband Bill, played by Larry Miller, and their disaffected teenage son Craig, played by Evan Peters. She deploys Ian Hart as gotcha photographer Don Conkey to stake out the hopes. He's skeptical, but hits pay dirt within moments of arriving. A shouting match about something or other between Cassie and Craig on the patio escalates into a hard smack across Craig's face before Cassie hurries off. Breathing he'll never doubt Lucy again, Don gets the shots, as has been established in this series, while mentally unstable, and for the record, he's been feeling somewhat more stable this season. He's an uncannily talented paparazzo, and once Cassie's gone, Don approaches Craig to see if he'd like to vent at all about the scene he had just witnessed. Craig thinks about it and invites Don in. Craig tells him his mother has been violent for years, that it doesn't take anything at all to set her off anymore, and then tells him there's something he should see. Craig leads Don through a secret door through the back of a closet and down the stairs to his parents' sex dungeon. That's how Don describes it upon seeing it. "This is a sex dungeon," he says. It's pretty convincing. The space looks expensive, darkly sensuous, leather padding everywhere. The room is appointed with a bed with a sort of complicated headboard and a cage built underneath it, an X-frame, and in the middle of the room a bondage frame with chains and cuffs. Don is snapping pictures left and right, astonished at this revelation, when suddenly Craig smashes him across the back of his head with a wine bottle. There's a lot of stuff going on in this episode. Lucy's publisher, Brent, is trying to sell the tabloid to Adam Prateau, a wealthy Eurotrash libertine played by Julian Acosta, who refuses to sign any deal unless Brent strips down and shows him his penis. For her part, Lucy is trying to keep her sources safe as she pursues a story about ruthless music mogul Tweety, a confrontation that comes to a head when her safe house is breached and Tweety assaults her. But for the purposes of this Friday Night Feature, I want to focus on this story, the neurodiverse paparazzo Don Conkey chained up in the sex dungeon of the home and family senatorial candidate who is already seeking to rehabilitate her image as an out-of-control sexual predator, and her downstairs sex dungeon. I'm just going to throw this out here so we're all on the same page. Should they choose to do so, and within zoning restrictions, consenting adults are absolutely allowed to install and enjoy a sex dungeon in their home, despite a disinclination, perhaps, to broadcast the presence of a sex dungeon as part, within, or alongside a couple's marital org chart, and despite the completely obtuse, careless, and inappropriate disregard in the case of this family, wherein their son became aware of their sex dungeon when he was 6. The presence of a sex dungeon certainly does not, in and of itself, speak to anyone's commitment to home and family, God and country. In all candor, where does one imagine the family came from? People can absolutely be good, wholesome, healthy people outside the strict constraints of missionary with the lights off, and while a subplot in a show that revolves around tabloid journalism would absolutely feast upon the revelation that good wife Susie Creamcheese, Hearth and Home and Senate candidate, occasionally employs a strap-on, I am not, in this podcast, standing in judgment. You do you, Bill and Cassie. And this ultimately was not the point of this episode, one of the most harrowing in the series. The point was to bring several countervailing motivations to a swirling crisis centered on the image of Don Conkey chained up in the basement of a senatorial candidate's home, kidnapped and assaulted by the son of that candidate, a candidate whose marriage, despite the presence and occasional use of a sex dungeon, was not the strongest, as demonstrated by her reaching out to her campaign manager, and her public comment on that as her family is in counseling and she's recommitted to her marriage. Well, Don Conkey comes to. He is shirtless, chained in place to a bondage frame with a leather collar around his neck, his wrists cuffed, held in place by 2 chains at his waist and cuffs around his ankles. Craig is burning him with cigarettes, so, along with contusion across the back of his head, he has burns and scarring on his chest. He's horrified. He's terrified. He demands that Craig release him, while Craig taunts him with barnyard noises. This would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about Evan Peters, who portrays Craig here. He was 20 when he was cast as the manipulative, out-of-control Craig Hope. 3 years before Ryan Murphy pulled him in as Tate, the manipulative ghost who seduces teenage Violet to the dead side in the premiere, the Murder House season of American Horror Story, a series in which he's never missed a season and barely missed an episode. He does dark and twisted very, very well. From what I've seen and the sheer variety of characters and situations he's portrayed, he's note perfect. The more outrageous, the more demanding, whatever the scene asks of him, he finds, inhabits, presents, and brings the impossible, the incredible, the otherwise unbelievable to life. This little one-off, Craig Hope, culpable, vulnerable in his parents' sex dungeon, pits him against Don Conkey's encyclopedic exploration of mental instability and brought out the best in both of them. You can't craft the towering, the powerful emotions at play in the sitting room drama of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in a broken-out subplot of a cable drama unless you've got exactly the right actors doing it, and that's what we have here. Craig seeks to dominate Don, to humiliate him as revenge for what reporters have been doing to his family. Don is hyper-aware and listening very closely to everything that's happening and analyzing it in real time. In the time it's taken for him to come to, however, Cassie has come home, and, hearing the ruckus, she comes downstairs and sees her son with a shirtless man chained up in her sex dungeon. She demands an explanation. Don tells her that he was attacked and chained up. Craig invited him. How else would he get in? Craig tells Cassie that Don is trying to get dirt on him, that he was trying to bring them down. Bursting into tears, he tells her that he was only doing it to protect her. Cassie is flustered that these people are in this space, but ever the practical planner tells Craig to let his ride to lacrosse practice know that he's not feeling well and won't be needing a ride. We're starting to smell cover-up. Don, after all, is chained up in her basement, and as long as that's where he is, the story goes nowhere. By this time, Bill has come home and joins them downstairs. Craig dozes off on the bed as Bill and Cassie's conversation floats among marriage dynamics, sickness, and power. Bill takes a dig that her Senate run is all that she cares about, and she lashes out at his inadequacy as a provider. Just from what he's heard while still chained up, Don lays into Cassie as a narcissist of mythological proportions and notes Bill could lead seminars on enabling. He heightens the tension, informing them that he's got a medical condition that could lead to seizures and even death, and they don't want that on their hands. He shifts his demands that they free him to a story that he'd broken in, that they'd attacked him in self-defense and tied him up for their own safety. To which Cassie says, "Oh, sure, I'm going to lead the police down here to my S&M dungeon and let them walk you out of here with your burns and your scars? Not a chance." After a while, Craig wakes up, and they learn that Craig has known about this space since he was a child, which horrifies them. Don reframes the situation that Craig's psychosis is the biggest problem they're facing, at which point Bill calls for a family meeting upstairs, and they leave Don alone for a while other business happens in other storylines that, yeah, honestly, they hold their own. Dirt Now's publisher negotiating control of the magazine as part of a drug-fueled orgy, and Lucy confronting a gangland enforcer in a not-so-safe house, ultimately setting him on fire and killing him. Again, that was really not the focus of this episode for me. The scene that followed as the Hopes returned to the basement was downright Emmy-worthy. Bill stands in front of Don and tells him that they have no choice. They're going to have to kill him. Don is pleading with him, with Cassie, with Craig as they individually re-enter that space, building a desperate counter-argument that they get their son committed, that he's a sociopath, a danger to himself and others. Emotions are running very high. Bill's got a gun. He shows it to Don. There's nothing else they can do, he says. He loves his family. He can't allow some photographer to destroy their lives. Don tells him to be real, that they'd have to deal with his body, that they don't want this. Bill and Cassie hesitate, considering this, and impulsively, Craig grabs the gun and tells them to let him take care of it. He puts the muzzle of the gun to Don Conkey's head and fires multiple shots as Don shrieks in terror. The gun clicks harmlessly. Bill never loaded the gun. He had the bullets in his pocket. Both Bill and Cassie stare at their son in disbelief. They realize that Don is right, that their son is a psycho, and what happens next is about the most human exchange of emotion and energy I've seen on television. They resolve to get their broken, disturbed, murderous son the help he clearly needs, freeing Don and asking him to leave. Don collects his things, says he's sorry for their loss, stumbles to his car and calls in, informing Lucy that he's been there all day and he's going home. There's no story here. Above the haunting strains of Pale by Reese Sinclair. I don't know if the Hopes deleted his photos. That would absolutely have been a thing that I did had I been either one of them while he was chained up. But the real story of the Hopes' sex dungeon stopped being about a bit of salacious kink to sell papers the moment Craig cracked Don across the back of his head. The resolution actually left me a little wobbly. I'd completely forgotten how the story played out, and I was amazed at how well it actually all came together. As Evan's career has progressed, it's clear he was cast perfectly. He has a real instinct for dark and unstable, and when I recognized him peering out from beneath his massive unruly curls, I was overjoyed. He does such amazing work in American Horror Story, and it was fun to see some of what led up to that. As for Courtney Cox, her willingness to step aside and let Ian Hart shine as hard as he did in this psychological thrill ride of an episode was generous. It became so much more than just the physical presentation of a man trapped inside his own mind and working his way out. It touched brilliant human drama. As a series, the FX drama of Dirt was a little uneven, mostly tracing stories easily tracked back to whatever was going on TMZ at the moment, but it was entertaining, and with my background in journalism, I kind of enjoyed watching this interpretation of it. Splashy and trashy, dishy and ballsy, and all the other dwarves to the side for the moment, Lucy insisted her stories be reliably sourced and her photos unshopped because she wanted Dirt Now to stay solidly credible. That and court proceedings can eat up your whole day. It only ran 2 seasons, and some stories were absolutely better than others, but I loved it. Fun show, and this was a good one to highlight.
Diving into the classic collection.
In my classic VHS to DVD collection, I ran into the powerful episode of Rescue Me in which former Ladder 62 Chief Jack McGee has a heart attack and Tommy's brother Johnny is killed in a gangland hit. In true Rescue Me fashion, the graveside ceremony is co-purposed as a wedding between Tommy's sister Maggie Gavin and clueless firefighter Sean Garrity. Everyone's Irish, so the wake and the reception are pretty much the same thing, but par for the course for this dark and sometimes hilarious emotional roller coaster of a show. I also enjoyed Psych's first season take on superhero conventions that culminated in an almost Agatha Christie-level reveal on the whodunit, a comic book artist whose aspirations were dashed by short-sighted fools who he conspired to bind hand and foot and trap beneath a stage wired with explosives which were set to go off in a fireball of vengeance. Fortunately, hyper-observant, not psychic Sean Spencer spots the clues he needs in order to foil his dastardly deed. Complete with a cameo appearance by George Takei, the episode is a love letter to comic book geeks and all of comic book geekdom. In movies, the BBC America presented Helen Mirren and Julie Waters in the 2003 production of Calendar Girls, a delightful skewering of social convention, the eternal message being that to help out one's friends and perhaps even cure cancer, one can certainly shed one's inhibitions a bit as well as one's top. Watch for scene stealer Philip Glenister as the young village photographer brought in to snap the shots. I see episodes of The Riches on FX have begun filtering back into view, Eddie Izzard and Minnie Driver reprising their roles as Wayne and Dahlia Malloy. Together with their kids, the Malloys are travelers, members of a loosely confederated family of Irish con artists and thieves. I'm not sure what to think about this. I have all of Season 1 catalogued, which was a more or less organized, well-presented story of a family who assumed the identity of the Riches, a family who met with an unfortunate accident, taking up residence in a gated community and, despite a few scrapes, perpetrating a scam Wayne calls the American Dream. As of Season 2, things are not at all slowly unraveling. The Riches are on the run, there are shots fired, Wayne's boss Hugh and Wayne's ne'er-do-well brother or brother-in-law Dale, anyway, someone from Wayne's past with an axe to grind, have drawn the attention of resident security to Wayne's home while Dahlia is on the road with the kids and Hugh's wife, and the real Mrs. Rich's mother, I think. Season 2, in my opinion, was just less successful than Season 1. So I recorded these episodes, but now I'm just kind of noting where they are, like one does with dog dew in the yard after the spring thaw, and for the same reason, so as to avoid it. Finally, a Season 2 episode of USA's The 4400 caught my attention. In voice as Carrie, Sharif Atkins plays Gary Navarro, the first of the 4400 to make the major leagues. Turns out he has developed an ability to read minds. At first he was only able to hear the pitcher's thoughts, but soon enough he's just hearing everyone's thoughts and is freaking out, unable to control it. NTAC helps him control his ability and, in a pivotal moment, brings him on board to help them counter what they see as Jordan Collier's nascent messianic movement. Cool series. Current collection. In my current direct-to-DVD recordings, I was able to make more progress, especially this past week, cataloging 4 more discs, leaving me about 20 to go before I close the gap with my current recordings. I cataloged some movies, including the FX production of Zero Dark 30 from 2012, Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises on TNT, also from 2012, and which I think completes that trilogy in my collection. I also had several Season 11 episodes of The X-Files. TV.com asserts that there are 6 more episodes to the season that I did not record, including 2 that they list after the finale even, and one with a name they pulled from an eye chart, maybe, called RM9SBG93ZXJZ. Gesundheit. But if they aired in our market, my DVR never grabbed them, and even if they're available on demand, you know what? I'm good. TV.com says they revisit the Williams storyline in My Struggle 4, but I've already taken the license this series granted me with the Mengele effect, or the Mandela effect, or the Howie Mandel effect, reorganized my experience of those episodes in my head to end with Scully's realization at the end of Ghoulie that she encountered William outside a gas station, and he said his goodbyes and made his way into the world, and that's all I'm going to need of this, as far as I can tell, left to its own devices. It's never going to die or end series. I also got a little further along on the American Crime Story Assassination of Gianni Versace story, the point where I started realizing that Murph was telling this story backwards, like that movie Memento, only as a television series, where we got to learn bit by bit how Andrew Cunanan became a serial killer. While confusing, this mode of storytelling was really compelling, I thought. Having seen the entire series, if we'd gone in order, starting with the penultimate episode and watched how messed up his family life had been with his oppressive, manipulative father and his mentally unstable mother, it might actually have come off a little trite, honestly. Murph's flipping the timeline was harder to follow, but landed the insights and the reveals stronger. It wouldn't work with everything. Opening the O.J. Simpson trial with Johnny Cochran crafting his, if the glove don't fit, something line and ending with the murder would have seemed silly somehow, but then the O.J. trial was a top-rated television program while it was going on. The Versace assassination was barely a blip on the radar by comparison, so this presentation really worked in my opinion. Ryan Murphy is a creative genius. I've enjoyed a lot of his work, including Nip Tuck, Glee for a while, The New Normal, most seasons of American Horror Story. I won't be needing a copy of Roanoke. Feud and these American crime stories have been awesome. I've never seen an episode of Scream Queens, and 911 seemed ridiculous, but generally he's got this whole TV show thing down. I'm looking forward to watching at least the pilot episode of Pose this coming weekend because, well, it's the song of my people, but the main thing is this. Generally, when Murph chooses to tell a story, not only is it a good story, a story worth telling in and of itself, he tells it in a really powerful way. Also, he seeks out stories other people aren't telling. The high school show choir geeks, the desperate, closeted gay guy who struggles with identity, the underlying darkness available for exploration in ordinary lives. A departure from past season, there was no actual supernatural dimension to this past season of American Horror Story. Beyond a few hallucinations, Cult was mostly just ordinary people acting on their hopes and dreams and fears. Now, nobody's perfect, but if I've got an hour to fill and a million ways to fill it, a Ryan Murphy production is generally a pretty solid bet.
What I've been watching.
In what I've been watching, I'll start with the 12th season of Supernatural, which I sat down and power binged last weekend, committed to getting that thing out of the to-do pile. I'm glad I did, but the reason it's been so difficult is their decision to keister a hefty piece of emotional baggage until the finale. So at the end of season 11, Amara decides to resurrect Mary Winchester, the boy's mother, and suddenly this pair of broken, stunted, emotionally malnourished cases of arrested development have a mom. And they love their mom, but something is off, and no one can really put their finger on it. Yeah, she's Rip Van Winkle the past few decades, and certainly there's British men of letters and, oh yeah, the spawn of Lucifer to contend with, but the disconnect between the family Winchester and their response to these developments. Mary wants to help the British invasion wipe all the monsters off the face of the earth. All of them, they find out, even the ones aligned neutral good and lawful neutral. They also brainwash Mary to kill her boys, and to fix that, Dean has to use some of their electronic gizmo-y hoodoo to mind meld with his mother and confront her in a memory. This is where that something feeling off came to a head. Dean tells her that he hates her. He hates his mother for leaving them alone, for making a deal with a crossroads demon that put Sam in jeopardy and led them down this path as hunters. As she finally starts reacting to him in her memory, he asserts that they also love her. The emotional hit lands. He's finally getting through to her when the British enforcer guy catches up with them and kills the agent monitoring their psychic link and then goes after them. Now fully reconciled, because issues like theirs wouldn't normally need about a year of therapy, Mary comes to and finishes the British guy, Ketch, and they're free to take on the Nephilim, the not-so-little bun in presidential advisor Kelly Klein's oven. There's a remote location, there's a sudden portal to another dimension in which the Winchester brothers were never born, and the war between heaven and hell is raging, so they've got to feel a bit chuffed in their very existence managed to at least avert that. They sling and slay and manage to lure Lucifer into the Mad Max Apocorama land, and yes, it's sad Mary ends up getting trapped over there as well, but so does Crowley finally, so okay, Birth of Satan's son, couldn't really see much of anything as he season 12 fade out, but hey, now I can finally watch season 13. Side note, I mentioned in episode 18 that I was looking forward to the Supernatural spin-off Wayward Sisters. I just saw in the Supernatural wiki that the CW declined to pick the show up for development. Which, for one thing, that's too bad, because this show has tended to develop strong, relatable female characters, but on the other hand, I kind of see it. Honestly, the middle tranche of season 12 episodes were a slog. They were trying very hard to establish the kind of grey areas that would crystallize the British men of letters as being bad, which, as storytelling goes, is more complicated than mounting up and taking on the bad guys. On some level, it took their targeting American hunters for no reason other than they're amateurs to make the Brits the bad guys, and if they got rid of all vampires and werewolves and wendigos and ghosts and demons and all that stuff, even the hunters would likely be okay with the trade-off. Though, if they were able to do all that stuff themselves, then, well, on your bike, let's see you. Vanquish all evil and off with you if it's so easy. In one situation, their strategy wasn't going to work because they'd misread measurements in feet as metric. These people, give them Latin, Aramaic, and Oki, and it's sorted, but if you really need to sneak something by them, give them a blueprint from the county planning office. What I'm saying is that it dragged, and this is not the first stretch of episodes in this series to do so. Take some of that energy that went into developing the spin-off series and make season 14 spectacular. What else? I saw Michael Bay's 2005 thrill ride, The Island, where Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson turn out to be clones developed as organ banks for rich people who then run around for a couple hours and somehow escape a holding facility in the desert with every resource and motivation to keep them in tight lockdown, and somehow no one can find them, even with Ewan having ingested nanobots that transmit radio frequencies. I mean, were you, I don't know, even trying? But where would be the fun in just catching them, since if they keep running, Michael Bay can have lots of things explode, and there can be fast cars and outrageously destructive blow-em-ups, and you feel bad for the clones, but you don't somehow feel bad about the world they're in, where if you're rich enough, you can have a whole other person made super fast and ready to be your backup liver should you need it. Yeah, this movie is all Logan's Run and human rights and sci-fi and Philip K. Dick, but what it actually would be is The Matrix, where all the clones were just farmed in pods to be used and discarded as needed, and who would watch that? Legion was good. I shared some thoughts on the Legion cast Podcastica. Go check it out, and oh, shoot, I said I had lots of thoughts on that. Okay, really quickly, after David crushed a few bad ideas, we left Ptonomy broken and crumpled at the base of a tree with feeds attached to his head and the Vermilion's assertion that
he's dying.
After his separation from the bad idea monster, he needed to recharge with good clean data, which Admiral Fukuyama seems to be providing. Ptonomy is wandering through his psyche, accessing his memories growing up, studying, being chosen as the repository for Division 3's secrets. While doing so, Ptonomy can access the Admiral's memory of the monk, and from there, the location of Farouk's body, and share that information with David by hacking into a Vermilion that looked like nothing so much to me as Bradley Whitford. Well, maybe Bradley Whitford from Nice Guys because of the mustache. He's not the only one making headway on the location of Farouk's body. Oliver has located the driver who transported the Shadow King Farouk's body to the monks in the first place, so now we've got Rowan Atkinson from Rat Race's realization, it's a race! He said a race! I hope I win. With David's carefully laid out plan and Farouk and Oliver's path as well. As of the end of this episode, Farouk has already clipped one of David's pieces from the board. He's instructed Clark to find the clock, but at Oliver's behest, Melanie snuck out of her room and knocked him out. But then, David had not included Sid in his plans, and when she discovered he'd left Division 3 to go after the body, she flew out and skydived to where he was, so it's not exactly the same, but you have to think on your feet when you're fighting Farouk. Which leads me to what I shared with the fine folks at the Legion cast. I rejected this ending, with the creepy Minotaur shambling out of darkness into view. That's Melanie's thing from the Maze World, and we haven't seen her since season 1, and I mean for realsies. Her wandering out of her room after, oh, hey, a year of sucking blue, sufficiently lucid to fell a trained and wary warrior, well, for me, we'd need more than a shot of her eavesdropping on Clark and Sid, and then popping out of her room, surprise, and cracking Clark on the noggin. Sure, all of that is Farouk by way of Oliver, but all of it is also pretty much out of nowhere. As for the narrated sequence, I noticed where they ran it towards the middle of the episode this time, so people would be less likely to just skip over it. Jon Hamm's clear, direct voice asserting that the most alarming delusion of all is that other people don't matter. Their feelings, their needs. It's the delusion of the narcissist, he said, that they're the only one that matters. The segment explored the transmission of disinformation and perception filters. A woman encounters a chicken, which she sees as a duck, and others see as something else. The back-and-forth confusion is like unto the Tower of Babel, and people can't even be civil anymore. I've thought for a while that we're in a new Dark Ages, that the information explosion has so covered us in data that we have zero ability or interest in sifting, contemplating, or evaluating. The top criteria for whether information is shared is it funny? Or, close second, does it reinforce my own worldview? Nobody's checking facts before sending them right along to everyone they know. It's disgusting, and my disgust is part of the problem. Just because I have decades of experience in sourcing news and tracking information, that doesn't make me smarter than other people, whose points of view may be different. I may find them short-sighted, ill-founded, ill-perceived, whatever. The people holding them are valid. The segment reminded me that I need to listen to other people I disagree with, and try to understand where they're coming from. We may still disagree, but I really do need to start respecting other people more. That said, do I suddenly have the patience and the time to chase down opposing viewpoints and explain my point of view? That meme with the pajama guy typing furiously at 4:36 a.m., someone on the internet is wrong. Trolling is absolutely a thing, and my time is limited, so yeah, nothing's really going to change here, probably. Finally, I wanted to comment on Deadpool 2, which I'm much more comfortable chatting about now since it was released last weekend, and if you're avoiding spoilers, what I'll say to you is, well, if you saw Deadpool, you should have a pretty good handle on this character, so if you liked that, this will be more of that, only more so, and you should totally go see it. I was impressed with this movie, which kind of felt like two movies, actually, both of which had an epic opening number. Very 007. Really hoping the Academy is paying attention. Any movie that opens with the title character dying is, well, I suppose Ghost kind of had something like that. But that traced that story arc. Ryan Reynolds' Wade Wilson, having worked so hard to reconnect with the love of his life, Vanessa, losing her to a common street punk he'd been pursuing in a work-related capacity. Blowing himself to smithereens was a bit emo, and doing so in a tenanted apartment building was worse. But hey, it's all part of living in the wake of the emotional thrill ride that is Deadpool, yes? Colossus drags him back to the Academy for repairs, and he signs on as a trainee for the X-Men, which is probably more like the second movie. In response to a distress call from the anti-mutant conversion facility, he confronts a moody teen with mutant powers calling himself Fire Fist. Everyone agrees this is a bad name. Deadpool discovers he's lashing out at the facility operators because, quite apart from their telling him his mutation is bad, the facility director is actually molesting him. Never mind that, we have property damage and arson, so Fire Fist and Deadpool are taken to the Icebox maximum security prison, and Deadpool escapes, but not before Fire Fist overhears him saying that he's got no regard for him. Well, Cable sure does. Cable is from a future devastated by an evil Fire Fist and targets him. Deadpool had just started feeling a bit paternal to the little guy and is certain he can intervene on his behalf so Fire Fist doesn't turn evil. Deadpool learns the prisoners are being transported, so he assembles a team of mostly mutants. There's a guy named Steve with a mustache who signed on because it sounded fun, who mostly die just skydiving to the transport route. The Superfly Domino, played by Zazie Beetz, her superpower is good luck. She and Deadpool survive. Domino because she lands on a giant inflatable panda, and Deadpool because, well, that's just what he does. They release Fire Fist, they also release Juggernaut, and that situation gets pretty sticky, especially when Juggernaut literally tears Deadpool in two, and he has to regrow his lower half. He and Domino and Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Yukio, the other X-Men, including Dirt's Evan Peters as Quicksilver, callback, decided to sit this one out. Work together to confront Fire Fist and Juggernaut, and no spoilers, there is someone's can involved, but that fight was uncanny. I was distracted by some tears welling up as the movie sucker punched me in the feels towards the end, but all in all I was pretty happy with the production, or the productions rather. Both movies together were quite a lot of fun. And with that, thanks for checking in on my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing with audio links at videofuzzy.blogspot.com and past episodes of this podcast at Apple Podcasts and iTunes at videofuzzy.libsyn.com. Feedback is always appreciated, and you can contact me through my blog or podcast sites, or through my Video Fuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For Video Fuzzy, I'm Terry J. Amon. Happy viewing!
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.